One. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, inasmuch as in the developed and Western world with a lot of privilege and opportunity, sure, we have access to freedom of speech, especially in social media. But if we take a look at other corners of the globe, like in authoritarian China with the CCP or in North Korea under their particular dictatorship, huge swaths of people in those authoritarian regimes and in many portions of the developing world live on a hand-to-mouth subsistence where they do not have enough capacity to even be able to help themselves. These particular individuals are the ones who do not have access or privilege to have electronic devices like PCs, laptops, iPads, and even smartphones to be able to actually participate in this discourse that opening talks about. These particular people are pushed onto the margin and actually co-opted by that authoritarian regime who actually shields them from the truth and shields them from that discourse. This, ladies and gentlemen, creates the ultimate vacuum and opportunity for those people who have the means, motivation, and capacity, bounded by money and politics, to actually further this particular divide because of capitalism. If side opposition wants you to believe that all of this access and freedom of speech on social media is a rising tide that lifts all boats to free and prosperous waters, we neglect and forget those people below the waterline, those people who have already drowned. A few strategic observations and ways in coming from closing government. The first is, both opening teams to one extent are kinda deadlocky and somewhat correct. I'd like to note that opening opposition is correct to flip opening government because to some extent opening government, especially in their first speech, sounds a little bit contradictory. I don't mean to knife here, I just have to point it out. Censorship and authoritarianism is a proposition argument. Cancel culture and the ability to call these things out is an opposition argument. And my response to cancel culture is, to what extent do these things work and how do these things actually happen in the political sphere, that what we see manifest because of your ability to express yourself? It largely becomes very adversarial, like what I was talking about in my points of information. It does not become something that wants to solve things, but actually find the blame and actually pin it on those particular people who oftentimes are the shareholders in these social media companies who actually bankroll and fund Elon Musk and Zuckerberg, who actually are driven by profit, which in itself reinforce the ability of these things to perpetuate in those algorithms. The first thing I have to say from closing government is that opening up is right. This is not a debate about freedom of speech in itself, but freedom of speech in social media. This debate is a value judgment on the effectivity of that discourse and the extent of the impact it has. At its core, capitalism and meritocracy on an economic, social, and political level are the cornerstone of social media companies and their businesses, which I posit is pay to win. This is an important premise and analysis that we miss from opening government that lubricates the way to be able to explain why these troll farms and anonymous accounts actually matter. Take a look at Zuckerberg on Facebook or Instagram, or Elon on Twitter or X. They are motivated by capitalist incentive structures that are actually because of profit. And we think this actually reinforces centralization and monopolies of individuals and businesses who have fame, power, and money. The intuition pump is very simple. Who are the people we see as an overriding narrative being able to control these things on social media? Businesses, multinational corporations, advertisements. These are the common denominators of people who are fucking famous celebrities, rich people, and successful businesses who are the ones who monopolize this particular power. And if the claim and clash of opening opposition is that, bro, at least on their side, people are aware, we can expand their awareness, we can expand the Overton window, We think that even if that happens, that's only from people who are educated, people who are rational, people who are smart and privileged, like all of us in the debate scene, generally speaking, to actually participate in these discussions. But majority of people, like I mentioned in my pre-oration, are boxed out or don't have the opportunity to even participate in these things, exacerbating that divide. More than just an echo chamber, it actually makes it worse. Those particular people who have the means, motivation, and capacity are the ones who write and spread and perpetuate these narratives. Number two, and this is a direct response to opening opposition, let's examine the quality of discourse that actually happens. Social media, yes, as opening said, are driven by algorithms, but more than just algos and bots and troll farms, we need to understand why these things happen. They push beliefs and narratives which are largely very adversarial and exacerbated because of the need for a profit incentive to have virality. That is to say, people are likely to create narratives like, let's eat the rich, fuck the 1% people in Wall Street, the people who are the 99%, the immigrants, the minorities are those people. And take a note and examine that logic. It sounds very believable, especially when persuasion is also a criteria. But at its core, this ultimately holds those particular individuals at that particular point to actually lead into particular civil war and civil unrest that actually divide these particular societies as opposed to trying to bring them together. Opening government talks about racism and racial profiling, which sure sounds like a big impact, but as an average reasonable person, I think it's fair to say that the average person isn't racist or bigoted. But the average Joe is actually susceptible to algorithms. The average Joe is susceptible to things like heuristics and biases and mentalities and herd behavior that actually become very adversarial, that lead to narratives like, oh, China equals automatically bad. US Trump, they're dumb. If you're right wing, you must not have a brain. And at any point, you have any dissent in whatever way, shape, or form against, God forbid, a minority or something related to DEI, you become the enemy of social media. You get canceled. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to be able to forward a particular society that actually has a chance at critical thinking, we need to be able to hold the culprit of social media as ultimately accountable as spreading these particular pernicious and perverse ideologies. We are very proud to stand on side proposition.